Hey there everyone, this is Adam-Antium here again. This has been a while since my last upload, but considering what day it is today, and considering that 4 years ago I uploaded a similar video talking about this subject, I thought it was time to revisit it and give what would be 4 years into the future perspective on how I felt then and how I feel now. But really, when it comes to the idea of Remembrance Sunday, I think one of the things that people miss is the opportunity to go from just remembering about something to learning the lesson that it's actually teaching. We need to go from just remembering to learning. And I think one of the reasons why we don't necessarily get there is because we're still steeped in justifications for warfare and for violence, in particular, even when it comes to punishment. But I'll get to that in a bit. One of the justifications that we have is self-defense against genocidal tyrants. You know, we tend to think that violence can always be justified by citing the self-defense argument for it, which, as we know, self-defense is the only justifiable use of force and or violence, right? But people try to slide that into any argument they make about it. But we justify our counterattacks to these genocidal tyrants with self-defense, and in doing so we ignore the lesson that the best way to provoke violence is to inflict violence, thus proving that even in our own behaviour, that violence only begets more violence in retaliation, unless the process is halted, unless somewhere along the chain there is a refusal to forge a new link in the chain to keep the cycle going. We retaliate because we emotionally feel the need to settle the score, and we forget, or maybe just don't acknowledge, the causal chain that the violence has taken up until that point when it injures us directly or affects us even indirectly by fear of violence. Are you going to pass the disease of violence on? Because that's really what violence is. It's a social sickness. Are you going to pass it on? Or are you going to use your own humanity to convert it into motivation for a positive direction? It's understandable that we feel locked into this way of thinking, because as a result of this enemy image mentality that established institutions that govern societies have to use as an enemy image, we've been told that unless we kill the enemy, then the enemy will soon be on their way to kill us. So it's like it creates a sort of urgency in the need for society to say, yes, our troops need to be doing more of this sort of thing, but it just leads to more conflict. Another justification that we're given for warfare is it's in our nature. It's just a blanket statement, human nature to be warlike and competitive and greedy and violent. It's in our nature. It's a way of explaining it away without actually needing to understand it. This creates a self-perpetuating cycle where we assume it's unchangeable and inescapable, and something under the surface that needs managing and suppressing, something like a pressure valve that needs to be let off. We assume that all this is innately in us and constantly needing to express itself. But that view has to ignore the social conditions that we live in. Warfare is one of the best uses for nationalism and to justify whatever the government wants, and uses the people to carry out violence on a global scale. Society is easier to control when there is an established enemy image and an established belief that violence is the only tool possible, the only effective tool to defeat said enemy, even though the very use of violence promotes counterattacks, and on and on and on the war goes. So with that in mind, one thing that I didn't necessarily cover in the last video is solutions. What do we actually do about war? How do we actually stamp it out? Well, I think one of the most effective is root cause analysis and addressing the root cause. The issue of human conflict is an issue of a large scale of human needs not being met. When human beings don't have their needs met, they have to develop more of a desperate behaviour in order to meet that need. And especially since the ways we meet those needs are culturally subjective, we start pushing for the meeting of needs in very destructive directions. For example, meeting the need for happiness or fulfillment, contentment, whatever you want to call it, seeking that through materialism, for instance. That's pushed hugely by our materialistic society because that's what keeps GDP up, but it's an unhealthy and unsustainable way of meeting a need of happiness. Very much like if we're needing to meet our need for basic survival and a need for a social condition that is nurturing and encouraging for human life and human spirit, as it were, human endeavour, we need a social condition that actually rewards and reinforces that, but we don't. This is why one of the main reasons why we have conflict. We're bred into divisive ways of thinking and ways of being, and there isn't enough to go around. It's the perfect recipe for conflict. So I think to solve this problem at the root, it is to improve the social conditions, to meet human needs directly. How this can be done? Quite possibly, this is just an idea. The direct meeting of human needs by attaching aid workers and any other necessary personnel to what would be a retrained and re-equipped military to create life systems such as vertical farms, 3D printing labs, solar fields and water purification, and engage the population in social therapies to address the needed shift forward in our values. To teach things like non-violent communication, critical thinking, empathy, scientific thinking, curiosity. We need to start healing things, not making things far more worse. We effectively need to improve the social conditions to allow people to meet their needs and thus not need to act in such distorted ways and develop distorted values just to be able to survive. We've reached the point now of having something called the Paris Climate Accord, where all but one country so far is committed to the issue of climate change. Next, I want to see a Paris Conflict Accord, where as many nations as possible become committed to addressing and resolving the issue of human conflict, committed to retraining their militaries towards helping heal the wounds caused by weapons, and helping to create the infrastructure of the future civilization to come. If you want to learn more about this approach of shifting society forward in more of a sustainable and ecologically friendly direction, away from needing such problematic ways of thinking and doing things, such as political systems and monetary systems, follow this link to the Zeitgeist Movement's official YouTube channel, and also please remember to subscribe to this channel to get more updates on my videos. Thanks for watching.